This guy right here, stand up.
Well, I just wanted to thank you, Governor, for coming today. I'm also a fellow New Jerseyan as well.
Excellent.
And I wanted to also ask you about banking reform as well, specifically about the big banks. You talked about how Dodd-Frank was okay for some of the larger banks, but I wanted to specifically ask you about the Volcker rule and about proprietary trading and whether you think that rule hurts the American economy and our competitiveness.
Now, from my perspective, we'd be much better off letting the markets operate and have aggressive law enforcement against those folks who decide to paint outside the lines. And we had a bunch of that, and nothing happened. And what that also makes the American people feel, the real folks out there, it makes it feel like the system's rigged for the rich. And it's hard to argue against that at the moment when you saw what happened in the light of the banking crisis. So we've got a lot of work to do in that regard, but I would start off by putting forward the name of a really aggressive, no-nonsense Attorney General who was going to not care which party you were in or what kind of outfit you wore, but you were going to be prosecuted based on what you did. That justice was going to be more than just a word. It was going to be a way of life. I remember telling my prosecutors when I was a U.S. attorney, when we would bring a case and we'd lose it. It didn't happen very often, but it happened. And they would come back and apologize to me. Say, Chris, I'm really sorry we lost this one. I'd say, ask you a question. Come on over here into the conference room. In the conference room, there was a podium there with the seal of our department. I said, read what that seal says. And this one young prosecutor said, it says Department of Justice. I said, right, it doesn't say Department of Prosecution. It says Department of Justice. Sometimes justice is an acquittal. Our job is to do justice. And that's the kind of Attorney General I want. Someone who understands that justice needs to apply to everyone. It needs to not just be a word. But it's not the Department of Prosecution. It's the Department of Justice. And you need an Attorney General and a President who understands that. That's the way I'd approach it. Let's see. Let's go all the way in the back. Guy all the way in the back there.
Coming in.
Oh, hey, how you doing?
Thanks for coming to Hanover. Until tonight, I had no idea there were this many Republicans in here.
Don't jump to wild conclusions.
I'm curious, does your progressive pro-life stance extend to capital punishment?
No, it doesn't. Here's why. Because I think there's always been exceptions for self-defense. That's why, in my position on abortion, I believe in exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother, because I think those are acts of self-defense by women. And I think they have the right to act in their own self-defense. And I believe in the same way that when people commit murder, that the state has a right to act in self-defense. And that's why I have a different concept on capital punishment. That's why I'm for exceptions to my pro-life stance on abortion, because I believe those are acts of self-defense. That's the way I've always looked at them. That's the way I continue to look at them. So I think it's consistent for that basis. It's always been the way our law has looked at it, and I think it's the way the law should look at it consistently now. Even further in the back, all the way in the back. Red shirt, right? Looks red from here. He's obviously got fans back there. Excellent. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
What is your reaction to the hundreds of thousands of people migrating out of the Middle East, and how would you handle this vast problem coming of the migrants?
Well, the first thing is to remember why it's happening. This is the cost of inaction. The cost of inaction. And not benign inaction. We said we were going to do something and then we didn't do it. That's worse. If you never say you're going to do it and then you don't do it, you might not, in retrospect, think it was the right decision, but at least you didn't promise people you were going to. These folks in Syria thought, well, when he starts using chemical weapons, the United States is going to come to our rescue. Because the President of the United States said that he would. And then it happens, and they're running in part because they believe there's no hope for them to be saved by staying. So let's remember first why it's happening. They're running because we let them down. We made a promise that we didn't keep. Now, you can argue about whether we should have made the promise in the first place or not. that's a valid argument, discussion to have, but once you make it, if you're the American president, you gotta keep it. Now, what would I do now? I would work with our allies in Europe and in the Middle East to make sure that there was an orderly progression of these refugees to those places, and I would help pay for setting up the appropriate types of housing and shelter for these folks. I don't think that we need to bring a lot of these refugees to the United States. I think it's fraught with danger to bring them here because I don't know how appropriately we'd be able to vet these folks and their backgrounds. But I do think that we have an international responsibility, not just because of geography, to foist this responsibility just on the folks who are nearest. And we have a role in creating this crisis as well. So I think we have a moral responsibility to help support those in other countries who are making sure that these folks are taken care of. So that's the way I would deal with it, sir. You're welcome. Let's get this young lady right here. You can, go ahead. Yeah, it should be far enough away without the feedback. It's not at the moment, but try it again.
Okay, so earlier you mentioned that your home state, New Jersey, ranks third in solar electricity generation. And here in a recent poll shows that 62% of Republicans strongly support the idea of allowing homeowners who produce their own electricity to send it back to the grid and receive credit on their energy bill. But currently in New Hampshire, we have a law that caps this so-called net trade system. And it actually reduces the number of homeowners that are able to generate their own solar electricity. So I was wondering, do you think we should do more to allow homeowners and companies to sell their own electricity back to the grid and produce it?
Sure. But what you've got to make sure of is that you have a system that can support it, right? You have to have an infrastructure that can support that, because if it starts to become really popular, you've got to have a system that's going to be able to handle it. But in concept, I don't have any problem with that at all. No. See, quick, easy answer to that one. Yes, right there.
Governor, I supported you since you beat my dad, old boss, Corzine, in person.
Hey, that was fun. You beat John Corzine. That was a lot of fun.
Yes, it was to watch that. However, I do support you, but Congress has always been a den of vipers. And how would you wrangle, not just, frankly, the Democrats as you wrangled them in Jersey, but you have people within your own party who are a tad hard to manage. How would you, frankly, wrangle this hydra?
I've heard. Well, you said, I want to make sure that all the media that's here, he characterized Congress as a den of vipers. So I'm just repeating his characterization. Congress may be a den of vipers. I can tell you the New Jersey State Legislature is no Easter egg hunt, okay? And so I've had training in how to deal with this. I think there are 3 steps you need to take as the executive, as the leader. The first is, you have to speak very clearly, very directly, and very plainly about what it is your priorities are. There can't be any confusion about what things are most important to you. Confusion leads to chaos, chaos leads to disorder, disorder leads to nothing getting done. And so when you're not clear and direct about these things, when you try to be everything to everybody, you can't be. You just can't be. So first, the executive has to be clear. Second, the executive has to care about establishing relationships with the legislative branch. Now, this goes back to my old friend, Governor Tom Kean of New Jersey, who served for 8 years as governor. He was later the chairman of the 9/11 Commission. After I was elected governor, I called him and I said, Governor, can I come by and have some sessions with you during the transition for you to teach me how to be governor? And he said, sure, I'd be happy to. And so I went over for my first meeting with him. And he said, here's the way these meetings are going to work, Chris. I'm going to ask you questions, you're going to answer them, and then I'm going to critique your answer. And that's the way you're going to learn. All right, sounds fair. I said, let's go, Governor. What's the first question? He goes, who's your best friend? I said, Mary Pat. He said, not anymore. He said, not anymore. He said, your new best friend is going to be the Senate President of New Jersey, Steve Sweeney. Now let me tell you about Steve Sweeney. Steve Sweeney is the Senate President. He's a Democrat. He's from South Jersey. And he is the president of the Iron Workers Local. Not a wallflower, everybody. And a true union guy. But what Governor Kean was saying to me was that given our system of government, you've got to make friends with this guy. You've got to make him your friend. And I did. Over the course of the years, We went out for dinner together. We went out for drinks together. We met each other's families. He knows Mary Pat and my kids. I know Patty and his 2 children. We've gotten to know each other. We've gotten to be friends. That does not mean we don't violently disagree at times. It does not mean that he has not said the most unspeakable things about me in public. But what it does mean is, every time he comes to the State House, and I'm there too, we meet. And it means that when we sit down across a table from each other without the press there, without anybody there, he knows that if I give him my word, I'll keep it. And I know that if he gives me mine, if he gives me his, he'll keep it as well. In Washington, we don't have any of that anymore. We have people at opposite ends of the hallway in Capitol Hill yelling and screaming at each other, sending out press releases to make each other look bad. And you got a president who doesn't engage with the Congress. Step 2 is you got to engage and make these folks trust you. Not believe everything you say, not agree with everything you say, but trust you. The third thing is that you've got to be willing to act decisively when confronted with problems. What Congress wants to see more than anything else is an executive that is decisive. That takes more issues off their plate and makes their job easier. They love that. They want their jobs to be made easier. But you can't do that if you're wringing your hands and spend 7 years to wait to decide whether you should stop the Keystone Pipeline or not. Okay? 7 years. What's that do? It causes all kinds of conflict in Congress for no reason. Congress passing bills that he's vetoing, Congress yelling and arguing and screaming about Keystone. He's known for years he wasn't going to do Keystone. And he didn't do it. Played politics with it. And it creates a toxic atmosphere. So you got to be decisive. They may not like the decision you make, but then it's over. And you move on to the next thing. And that's the way you make progress.